The school auditorium buzzed with excitement that Friday afternoon. It was the annual talent show, one of those days when everyone seemed a little lighter, more talkative and full of nervous laughter. Students rushed around backstage, fixing costumes, tuning guitars, and adjusting microphones. Teachers tried to keep order, though it was clear they had given up on complete control hours ago. The smell of popcorn and the hum of chatter filled the air. Among the crowd sat a quiet girl named Lila. She was sitting near the back row, holding a folded piece of paper in her hand. Her heart beat faster every time she looked toward the stage. She hadn't even told many people she had signed up for the show. In fact, only her best friend knew, and even she had raised her eyebrows in surprise. Lila wasn't the type who usually got attention. She didn't play sports, didn't hang out with the popular crowd, and rarely spoke in class. Most people recognized her face but didn't know her name. She often sat alone during lunch, sketching in a small notebook or listening to music through her old earphones. The piano on stage was large, shining under the bright lights. To everyone else, it was just another instrument waiting for the next performer. But to Lila, it looked like a mountain she wasn't sure she could climb. Still, she knew this was her chance. She had practiced for weeks, late at night when the house was quiet and her younger brother had gone to bed. Her mother worked long shifts at a small diner, and they couldn't afford piano lessons. The only reason Lila even knew how to play was because her father had found an old keyboard at a thrift store 2 years earlier. Some of the keys didn't work and the sound sometimes crackled, but it was enough for her. She had watched hundreds of videos online, teaching herself note by note, song by song. Now, sitting in that noisy auditorium, all that practice suddenly felt like it didn't matter. What if she made a mistake? What if everyone laughed? Her stomach twisted as she watched other students go up and perform. Some sang, some danced, some made the audience laugh with funny skits. The applause for them was loud, cheerful, encouraging. Lila wondered if she'd get even a single clap. When her name was finally called, she froze. Her palms went cold, and for a second she thought about pretending she was sick. But before she could change her mind, a teacher gently nodded toward the stage and said, "You're up next." The bright lights hit her eyes as she walked out. The room seemed to grow quieter, though she could still hear whispers. A few students in the front row exchanged amused looks. Someone whispered, "Wait, she's going to play the piano?" Followed by a quiet laugh. Lila heard it. She tried not to look up, but her heart sank a little. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, and for the first time, the piano didn't look inviting at all. It looked enormous, almost intimidating. She sat down slowly on the wooden bench. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. She could hear faint giggles in the audience, just a few, but enough to sting. Someone in the back whispered something that made others chuckle. Lila looked down at the keys. White and black. Ordinary. But for her, they were a language she had learned in secret. Every key had a memory. The first time she'd managed to play a simple melody. The night she had cried because her keyboard stopped working. The day her father had smiled at her and said, "You're getting really good, you know that?" She took a slow breath and placed her fingers on the piano. For a brief second, everything went silent. Even the whispers faded. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was waiting to see if she'd make a fool of herself. Her first note was soft, almost hesitant. Then came the second, then the third. The sound filled the hall, clear, gentle, unexpected. The same students who had laughed moments earlier leaned forward in surprise. Lila had chosen to play a piece she had learned completely by ear. It wasn't flashy or loud. It was a slow, emotional melody she had written herself. Each note told a story, one she couldn't explain with words. As her fingers moved, her nervousness began to fade. The music took over. Her hands glided smoothly across the keys, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She forgot about the audience, the stage, the laughter. In that moment, it was just her and the piano, speaking in a language only they understood. From the audience, the transformation was unbelievable. The same girl who had walked up shyly, head down, now played with such confidence and emotion that the room felt different, quieter, softer, almost enchanted. The students who had mocked her earlier exchanged uneasy glances. The teachers at the back smiled knowingly, as if they had been waiting for a moment like this all day. Even the principal leaned forward in his chair, his eyebrows raised. Lila didn't see any of it. She just kept playing. Each note was a memory, each chord a feeling. The melody rose and fell like waves, sometimes peaceful, sometimes full of quiet strength. When she reached the final part of her song, the music slowed down, becoming gentle again, like a whisper that didn't need to be loud to be heard. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was deep and complete. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then came a single clap, then another, and then suddenly the whole auditorium erupted into applause. Leela blinked, almost startled. She turned around and saw everyone standing, students, teachers, even the ones who had laughed before. Some were smiling, others looked amazed. She didn't know what to do, so she just smiled shyly and gave a small bow before walking off stage. Backstage, her heart was still racing. She could hear people talking, some saying things like, "I didn't know she could play like that." And that was amazing. Her best friend ran up and hugged her tightly, saying, "You did it. You really did it." For the first time in a long time, Lila felt light, as if the weight she'd been carrying for years had lifted. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she belonged there, that her voice, her music, mattered. Later that evening, when the show ended and everyone was leaving, a few students who had laughed earlier walked up to her. They looked awkward but sincere. One of them said quietly, "Hey, that was really good. Sorry for, earlier." Lila smiled and said, "It's okay." And she meant it. That night when she got home, she placed her old keyboard back on her desk. The keys were still chipped and one corner was cracked, but to her it was perfect. She sat down and played the same melody again, softer this time. Her little brother peeked through the door, listening quietly. As the last note faded into the quiet of the room, Lila looked out the window and smiled. For the first time, she wasn't scared of being seen. The next morning, Lila woke up with sunlight gently touching her face. For a few seconds, she lay still, wondering if everything that happened the day before was just a dream. Then she saw the old keyboard on her desk and smiled. It wasn't a dream. It had really happened. The sound of applause, the smiles, the way people had looked at her, it was all real. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She got ready for school with a little more energy than usual. The bus ride felt different, too. People who used to ignore her now glanced her way, whispering softly to one another. A few smiled when she looked up. Lila wasn't used to that kind of attention, so she just smiled shyly and looked out the window. When she entered the school gates, she heard someone call her name. It was a classmate from science class, one who had never spoken to her before. "Hey, that was really amazing yesterday," the girl said, walking beside her. "I didn't know you could play like that." Lila blushed and mumbled a quiet thank you. It felt strange but nice to be noticed for something she loved. Throughout the morning, people kept coming up to her. Some asked if she had been playing for years. Others asked if she could teach them a few notes. Lila wasn't used to talking this much. For once, she wasn't the quiet girl sitting in the corner. She was the girl who had played the piano so beautifully that everyone was still talking about it. At lunch, instead of sitting alone by the window as she usually did, she found herself invited to a table with a few friendly faces. They asked her questions, not in a teasing way, but with genuine curiosity. "Did you really teach yourself?" one boy asked. "Yeah," she said softly. "Mostly by watching videos and practicing a lot." They looked impressed. One girl shook her head in disbelief. "Wow, that's talent. I can't even play a single song properly." Lila smiled and laughed quietly. For once, it felt easy to be part of the group. Later that day, her music teacher called her to stay after class. Lila hesitated, worried she might be in trouble, but his expression was warm. "You played beautifully yesterday," he said. "You have a natural gift. How long have you been learning?" She shrugged, unsure how to answer. "A couple of years, I think. I just practiced whenever I could." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like you to play something for the school assembly next month. Would you be interested?" Her heart skipped a beat. The school assembly wasn't like the talent show. It was much bigger, with parents, teachers, and guests from outside the school. The thought of playing in front of that many people scared her. But deep inside there was a spark that whispered, "Say yes. I'd love to," she said quietly. The teacher smiled. "Good, I'll help you prepare. You have something special, Lila. Don't hide it." That evening, she walked home with a small smile that wouldn't fade. Her mother was already home, and to Lila's surprise, she was reading a newspaper spread open on the table. On the front of the local section was a photo of Lila sitting at the piano from the talent show. "Mom," she gasped. "That's me." Her mother laughed softly, eyes shining with pride. I know. One of the teachers must have told the reporter about your performance. They called you the quiet girl who stole the show. Lila sat down beside her, reading the article 3 times just to make sure it was real. It talked about her courage to step up, her beautiful performance, and how she had surprised everyone. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You did something wonderful. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." That night, Lila played the piano again, but this time the music flowed differently. It wasn't nervous or uncertain. It was calm, full of gratitude. Her little brother sat beside her, tapping his foot to the rhythm. "You're famous now," he teased with a grin. She laughed. "Hardly. I just played one song." "Yeah, but it made everyone quiet," he said. "Even the loud kids." That made her smile even wider. A week later, Lila was invited to perform at a local community charity event. It was a small gathering organized to raise funds for the town's library. Her teacher had recommended her, and the organizers had been eager to include her. She was nervous again, but she agreed. Something inside her knew that each chance to play was a step forward, even if it scared her. For the next few days, she practiced every evening, repeating each note until it sounded perfect. Her fingers would sometimes ache, but she didn't stop. She wanted to make it special. The night of the event arrived quickly. The hall was larger than her school's auditorium, and the lights seemed brighter. People were dressed nicely, chatting softly, holding cups of coffee and programs in their hands. Lila waited backstage, clutching her hands together, trying to calm herself. When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and walked out. The applause that greeted her was polite and gentle, but as soon as she sat at the piano, everything else faded. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The melody started soft, just a few quiet notes that filled the room like a whisper. Slowly, it grew stronger, deeper, more emotional. The crowd went silent, listening intently. Every key seemed to speak for her, telling a story she couldn't say out loud. By the time she finished, the entire hall stood to their feet. The applause was thunderous. Some people even wiped their eyes. Lila bowed her head, her cheeks warm, and smiled shyly before walking off stage. Backstage, a woman in her 30s approached her. "That was beautiful," she said. "You play with so much feeling. Would you consider performing at our community center next month? We host small music sessions for kids, and I think you'd inspire them." Lila was surprised. "Me? Teach kids?" The woman smiled. "Yes, you have something special. You make people listen." That night, when Lila got home, she told her mother everything. Her mother hugged her tightly and said, "This is just the beginning." The next few weeks were busy. Lila balanced schoolwork with music and began helping a small group of children at the community center. She wasn't an official teacher, but she showed them the basics: how to find middle C, how to listen carefully, and how to play gently. The children adored her. Some of them were shy like she used to be, and she loved helping them open up. But not everything was easy. A few classmates started acting differently. Some still supported her, but others whispered that she was showing off. One afternoon, she overheard someone say she was just lucky. It hurt, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she went home and played the piano until the noise of those words disappeared. Music was still her safe place. One evening, while she was practicing, her mother came in holding an envelope. "This came for you," she said, smiling. Lila opened it slowly and her eyes widened. It was a letter from a local music academy. They had seen her performance at the charity event and were inviting her to audition for a scholarship program. Her heart pounded. "Mom, do you think I can do it?" Her mother smiled softly. "I know you can." That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. The laughter at the talent show, the applause, the newspaper story, and now this letter. It felt unreal, but deep down she knew she had earned every bit of it. The next morning, she woke up early and sat at her piano. The world outside was still quiet, and the morning light was soft. She pressed the first key gently, then another, and soon a new melody began to form, something hopeful, full of possibility. As she played, she realized that her journey wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could keep going, that her dreams mattered. Every note she played was a reminder of how far she had come. And even though she didn't know what would happen next, she smiled to herself, knowing one thing for sure: she was ready to find out. The morning of the audition arrived sooner than Lila expected. The letter from the music academy sat neatly on her desk, reminding her how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she was the quiet girl nobody noticed. Now she was about to play in front of real judges, people who could decide her future in music. The thought made her both excited and nervous. She woke up early, even before the sun had fully risen. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. Her mother had left her favorite breakfast ready on the table, a simple note beside it. "You've got this. Just play from your heart." Lila smiled at the note, feeling her mother's belief in her. It meant everything. She wasn't from a family with money or music lessons or fancy instruments, but she had something more: support, love, and a will that had carried her this far. As she got ready, she packed her small bag with the sheet music she had practiced endlessly. Even though she had memorized every note, she wanted to keep it with her for comfort. Her little brother peeked into her room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "You're going to do great," he mumbled. "You always do?" Lila smiled and ruffled his hair. "Thanks, buddy." The drive to the academy was quiet. Her mother drove slowly, glancing at her from time to time. "Nervous?" she asked softly. "A little," Lila admitted. "What if I mess up?" Her mother shook her head. "You won't, and even if you do, it doesn't matter. You're brave enough to be here. That's already something special." Those words stayed with her as they pulled up to the tall brick building of the academy. The place looked beautiful, old but grand, with vines crawling up its walls and wide glass doors that shone in the morning light. As soon as they entered, Lila heard the faint sound of pianos from different rooms. Students were practicing, warming up, and the air was filled with music. A woman at the front desk smiled kindly. "You must be Lila. Welcome. You'll be auditioning in room 3. Lila nodded, her throat dry. She followed the hallway, her fingers clutching the strap of her bag tightly. When she reached room 3, the door was slightly open. Inside, 3 judges sat at a long table, each with papers and pens. A grand piano stood in the middle of the room, shining under the soft lights. "Come in," one of the judges said warmly. "Take your time." Lila walked in slowly, her heart pounding. She sat on the bench, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers. The room was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. She remembered what her mother said, "Play from your heart." So she did. The first note came out soft but steady. Then another and another. Soon the music filled the room, flowing like a gentle stream. It was the piece she had written herself, a song she called Second Chances. Every note carried a memory, a feeling, a piece of her journey. The judges listened silently, their faces calm but attentive. Lila didn't look at them. She just played, letting her hands move the way they had so many times before. Her nerves slowly faded, replaced by peace. She wasn't performing anymore. She was sharing something honest. When the last note faded, she lifted her hands from the keys and sat quietly, waiting. The silence stretched for a few seconds, and then one of the judges smiled. "That was beautiful," he said. "You play with real emotion." Another nodded. "Tell us, did you write that yourself?" Lila nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." They exchanged impressed looks. The woman in the center leaned forward. "You have a natural ear for melody. Your technique will improve with guidance, but what you have can't be taught. You play with heart." Lila's cheeks warmed. "Thank you," she said softly. "You'll hear from us soon," the judge said kindly. When she walked out of the room, her mother was waiting in the hallway. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think it went okay," Lila said with a shy smile. Her mother hugged her tightly. "That's my girl." The following days were a mix of hope and worry. Lila tried not to think about the audition too much, but every time the phone rang or a letter came in, her heart jumped. She still practiced every evening, playing the same piece again and again, not because she had to, but because it made her feel alive. One afternoon, while she was helping the kids at the community center with their piano lessons, her phone buzzed. It was an email notification from the academy. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Lila, we are delighted to inform you that you have been selected for the scholarship program at the Academy of Music and Arts." She gasped, her eyes filling with tears. The kids around her looked curious. "Are you okay, Miss Lila?" one of them asked. She laughed through her tears. "I'm more than okay." That evening, when she told her mother and brother, they celebrated with her favorite meal. It wasn't anything fancy, just pasta and garlic bread, but it felt like a feast. Her mother raised a glass of juice and said, "To dreams that come true." Lila's eyes sparkled. "And to the people who believe in them." The next few weeks passed in a blur. Lila started attending the academy's weekend classes while still going to regular school. It was a lot of work, but she didn't mind. She loved every second of it. The teachers there were kind but strict. They pushed her to learn new techniques, read sheet music faster, and challenge herself with complex pieces. At first, she felt out of place among students who had been trained for years. They played confidently, effortlessly. She stumbled sometimes, made small mistakes, and doubted herself. But every time she felt like giving up, she remembered where she started, from a broken keyboard and nights of practice when nobody was watching. Slowly, she began to improve. Her confidence grew. The other students started to notice her too, not just as the scholarship girl, but as someone who truly loved the music. One afternoon, as she practiced in one of the smaller rooms, an older student stopped by the door. "Hey," he said with a friendly smile. "That's a nice piece. Is it yours?" Lila nodded shyly. "Yeah, kind of," he grinned. "You've got talent. Don't ever lose that." Those small words meant the world to her. By the end of the semester, the academy announced a recital where students could perform in front of their families and local guests. Lila was nervous again, but also excited. She chose to perform Second Chances, the same piece that had won her the scholarship. It felt right. It was the song that started everything. On the night of the recital, she stood backstage in her simple dress, her hands trembling slightly. The audience was large, the lights bright. Her mother and brother sat in the front row, smiling proudly. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage. This time, there was no laughter, no whispers, only quiet anticipation. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Then she began to play. The melody flowed effortlessly, each note carrying warmth and truth. The hall filled with sound, soft, emotional, powerful. People leaned forward, drawn in by the story her music told. When she finished, there was a pause and then applause that felt like a wave crashing over her. She looked up, tears in her eyes, and saw her mother standing, clapping harder than anyone else. After the recital, her music teacher approached her with a proud smile. "You did beautifully," he said. "You belong here." That night, as they drove home, Lila looked out the window, watching the lights blur past. She thought about everything. The laughter from the talent show, the kindness that followed, the journey from fear to confidence. She realized that life was a lot like music. Sometimes it started in a minor key, full of uncertainty and doubt. But if you kept going, if you believed in your own rhythm, it could turn into something beautiful. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she promised herself one thing. She would never stop playing. After the recital at the academy, Lila's life began to feel both exciting and overwhelming. She woke up every morning with a sense of purpose she had never felt before, but at the same time, the weight of expectations rested lightly on her shoulders. She was no longer the quiet girl who could fade into the background. People now noticed her, praised her, and looked to her for inspiration. At school, everything had changed. Some of her classmates who had laughed at her during the talent show approached her with smiles, saying things they never would have before. Some apologized for their earlier behavior, admitting that they hadn't realized how talented she really was. It was strange, almost surreal to hear people speak kindly when just months ago she had felt invisible. Other students were curious about her new experiences. "How is the academy?" they asked. "What's it like?" Lila answered simply, trying not to seem boastful. She wanted them to know it was about the music, not the attention. "It's hard work, but I love it," she said honestly. Her afternoons were now split between school, the community center, and her academy lessons. She sometimes felt exhausted, but she never complained. Every day brought something new. A challenging piece to learn, a student to teach at the community center, or a performance to prepare. She felt alive in a way she hadn't before. One day, her music teacher at the academy invited her to perform at a local music festival. It was a small festival, but people from nearby towns came to watch. She hesitated at first, nervous about playing in front of an unfamiliar audience. But her teacher reminded her gently, "The music is yours. Just share it honestly, and everything else will fall into place." Lila practiced for weeks. She chose a piece she had written herself, But she also added a few classical touches she had learned at the academy. Her fingers moved confidently across the keys, her melodies full of emotion. She practiced late into the evenings, often losing track of time as the music carried her away. The morning of the festival, the sun was bright, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and grass. She walked with her mother and little brother toward the stage, her heart racing. She had performed many times now, but the nerves never completely went away. Every performance felt like the first, a mix of excitement, fear, and hope. When she stepped onto the stage, she looked out at the audience. There were families, music lovers, even people she didn't know who had traveled from other towns just to hear the festival. She felt small for a moment, unsure if she could meet their expectations. But then she looked at the piano, at the familiar keys, and felt a quiet reassurance. This was where she belonged. She began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but soon her confidence grew. Her hands moved gracefully, guided by both technique and emotion. The music flowed like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes surging with energy. People in the audience leaned forward, captivated. Even a few children sat cross-legged near the front, listening with wide eyes. As she played, Lila thought about her journey, the long nights at her old keyboard, the talent show where everyone laughed, the first applause that made her heart swell, and the academy that had given her a chance to grow. All of it had led to this moment, and she let every memory pour into her music. When the last note faded, the crowd erupted into applause. It was loud, warm, and sincere. Lila's cheeks burned as she bowed, feeling the rush of joy and relief. People came up to her afterward, shaking her hand, praising her, even asking for autographs. She smiled politely, grateful but a little overwhelmed. Backstage, her music teacher hugged her. "You did beautifully," he said. "The way you connect with the audience, that's rare." Her mother and brother were waiting as she walked off stage. Her mother's eyes sparkled with pride. "I told you," she said softly. "You were ready." The days that followed were filled with new opportunities. A local newspaper ran a feature about the festival, highlighting her performance and calling her a rising talent. Teachers and neighbors praised her, and even some of her classmates started showing genuine interest in her music. Despite all the attention, Lila remained grounded. She continued helping the children at the community center, finding joy in teaching them simple melodies and encouraging their small achievements. She realized that music wasn't just about applause or recognition. It was about connection, sharing something meaningful with others. One afternoon, while practicing at the academy, she overheard two older students talking. "She's really good," one said. "I didn't expect it at first, but now." "Wow," the other nodded. "Yeah, she's worked hard. You can tell. It's not just talent, it's dedication." Hearing that made Lila feel proud but also humbled. She knew she still had a long way to go, and there was always something new to learn. The journey was ongoing, and she was ready to embrace it. A few weeks later, her academy arranged a small recital for parents and local supporters. Lila was chosen as one of the main performers. She spent days preparing, practicing late into the night, refining each note until it was exactly how she wanted. The piece she chose was one she had written during the quiet nights at home, a song about perseverance and hope. The night of the recital, she stepped onto the stage, her hands steady this time. She looked at the audience and saw her mother and little brother sitting proudly in the front row. The familiarity of their support calmed her nerves. As she played, she felt something she hadn't noticed before, a sense of peace. The music wasn't just for others anymore, it was for her. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, her victories. The audience listened silently, some closing their eyes, letting the music speak to them. When she finished, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. People came up to her, praising her music, asking questions, wanting to know how she wrote it. Lila felt a quiet satisfaction. She realized that music had given her a voice, a way to express feelings she couldn't always put into words. After the recital, a man approached her. "You have something special," he said kindly. "Have you ever thought about performing on bigger stages? Maybe even traveling to share your music?" Lila thought about it. The idea was intimidating but exciting. "Maybe someday," she said softly, smiling. Her mother hugged her that night and said, "Whatever you choose, we'll support you. You've come so far and this is just the beginning." As weeks turned into months, Lila continued to grow as a musician. She learned new techniques at the academy, experimented with different styles, and even composed a few new pieces. Her confidence blossomed, but she remained humble, remembering the quiet girl who had once been laughed at for touching a piano. She also noticed how her music affected others. At the community center, the children she taught began to gain confidence, learning to play simple tunes and sharing their small successes with joy. Seeing their smiles reminded her of the power of music, not just to impress but to inspire. Even at school, her relationships improved. Some classmates who had been distant before now approached her with respect. She realized that her journey had changed not only her, but how others saw her. People began to understand that talent and dedication deserved recognition, regardless of someone's past or personality. One rainy afternoon, as Lila practiced in her room, she thought about the moments that had shaped her. The laughter at the talent show, the quiet encouragement of her mother, the first applause, the opportunities at the academy, and the joy of sharing music with children. All of it had built her into who she was now. She pressed a key softly, then another, letting the melody flow. Each note felt like a conversation, a connection with the world outside her small room. She realized that music had given her more than skill. It had given her courage, patience, and a way to touch hearts. That night, as she went to bed, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She knew the journey ahead would have challenges, but she also knew she was ready. She had faced fear, doubt, and laughter, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. Lila drifted off to sleep with a gentle smile, dreaming of new stages, new melodies, and the people whose lives she could touch with her music. She understood something important now. It wasn't about being the best or receiving recognition. It was about staying true to herself, embracing her journey, and sharing her gift with the world. The next few months felt like a whirlwind for Lila. She was no longer just a student trying to hide in the corner. Her days were filled with music, practice, and new experiences that pushed her out of her comfort zone. Even the small routines of her life had changed. Mornings were for schoolwork, afternoons for the community center, and evenings for hours of practice at the piano. Despite the busy schedule, she never felt burdened. Music had become her home, a place where everything made sense. It was where she could feel free, where she could express herself without fear. The applause and recognition were welcome, but it was the connection she felt with the piano and the melodies she created that mattered most. One afternoon, her music teacher approached her with a special request. "There's a citywide music competition coming up," he said. "I think you should enter. You have the talent and the heart to win." Lila hesitated. The thought of competing against other talented musicians made her stomach twist. She remembered the laughter from the talent show, the fear she had felt at the academy audition, and the pressure of the recital. But then she looked at her teacher, who had always believed in her, and nodded. "I'll try," she said quietly. Over the next few weeks, she prepared tirelessly. Every evening, she sat at her keyboard, refining each note, practicing every piece she intended to play. She experimented with different rhythms, explored emotions she had never expressed through music before, and pushed herself to new limits. Some nights her fingers ached, her eyes burned from concentration, and her body felt heavy with exhaustion. But she kept going. Every note mattered. Every melody told a story. Her family watched her quietly. Her mother often peeked in at night, smiling softly as Lila played, and her little brother would sometimes tap along to the rhythm, whispering, "That's amazing." Those small moments reminded her why she played, because music was not just for the audience, but for the heart, for connection, and for the moments that could make life brighter. The day of the competition arrived, and Lila could feel the nerves building. The hall was enormous, filled with people, cameras, and musicians from all over the city. Some of them had trained at prestigious music schools for years. Lila felt small, intimidated, but she reminded herself of all the moments that had brought her here. The talent show, the charity event, the academy recital, and took a deep breath. When her name was called, she walked to the stage, heart racing. The lights were bright, the audience silent, waiting. She sat at the grand piano and let her hands rest on the keys for a moment. She closed her eyes, remembering her first practice on the broken keyboard at home, the nights she had stayed up learning by herself, the moments of fear and doubt she had overcome. Then she began to play. The first notes were gentle, like a whisper, but soon the music grew, weaving a story full of emotion and meaning. She played from the heart, letting every fear, every memory, every joy flow through her fingers. The audience was silent, captivated by the melody. Lila didn't notice the cameras, the judges, or the lights. It was just her and the piano, and in that moment nothing else mattered. As she reached the final part of her piece, the music swelled with power and emotion. She could feel the connection to every person in the room, the way her music spoke to them without words. Her fingers moved faster, yet precisely, each note intentional, each chord a message. When the last note faded, a breathless silence filled the hall, as if the audience was holding their breath, waiting for the moment to end. Then came the applause. It started softly, hesitant, and then grew into a roar that shook the room. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Lila's cheeks burned as she bowed, overwhelmed by the sheer warmth and intensity of the response. She walked off stage, trembling, her heart full of a mixture of relief and joy. Backstage, her music teacher hugged her tightly. "You were incredible," he whispered. "No one could have played that with more emotion. You've come so far." Her mother and brother were waiting at the edge of the stage. Her little brother ran up and hugged her tightly. "You did it." "You were amazing," he said, grinning. The judges approached her moments later. "You have something rare," one said kindly. "Talent, yes, but also the ability to make people feel. That is a gift. Keep playing like this and you will go far." Later that evening, the results were announced. Lila had won first place. The news was surreal. She had competed against some of the most talented young musicians in the city and emerged victorious. But even more than the trophy, she cherished the journey, the courage to try, the persistence to keep learning, and the joy of sharing her music with others. Winning brought new opportunities. Invitations to perform at festivals, local events, and even a radio station came in. Yet Lila remained grounded. She never let the attention overshadow the reason she had started playing in the first place: the love of music and the desire to share it with others. She continued teaching the children at the community center. They had grown more confident under her guidance, and she loved seeing them discover their own voices through music. Sometimes they would play simple duets together, and she would watch their faces light up when they realized they had created something beautiful. At school, things had changed too. Lila no longer felt the sting of judgment or mockery. People respected her for her talent, but also for her humility. She had shown them that dedication, courage, and heart could overcome doubt and fear. Some classmates who had once laughed now came to her for advice, eager to learn from someone who had achieved so much with quiet determination. One quiet evening, after a long day of practice, Lila sat at her piano, thinking about how far she had come. She remembered the laughter from the talent show, the first applause, the academy auditions, and every small step that had led her to this point. She realized that music had given her more than skill. It had given her confidence, resilience, and a way to touch people's hearts. Her mother peeked in, holding a cup of tea. "You've grown so much," she said softly, smiling. Lila looked up and nodded. "I have," she replied, "and it's just the beginning." As the weeks went by, Lila continued to grow as a musician. She wrote new pieces, experimenting with different emotions and styles. She performed in front of larger audiences, always striving to connect with people through her music. She realized that every performance was more than just notes on a page. It was a story, a message, a piece of herself shared with the world. Her little brother often sat beside her during practice, sometimes joining in with small notes or clapping to the rhythm. "You make music feel alive," he said one day. "I never knew music could be like this," Lila smiled. "It's because it's meant to be shared," she said softly. Through it all, she remembered the quiet girl who had once been laughed at for touching a piano. She had come a long way from that moment, but she never forgot it. The laughter had been painful, yes, but it had also sparked something inside her, a determination to try, to persevere, and to believe in herself even when no one else did.